Live on YouTube, it's Sagittarius, according to Phaladipika. Let us jump in. Greetings, Samurai and Kitty. Let's get started. All right. You need to be able to see it, so it needs to be bigger. That should be good enough. Dirghasya Kanta Pratukarnasa. Dirghasya Kanta Pratukarnasa Karmodyata Kubjatanu Nriprishta. There's a lot of actual little mistakes that are possible to make with these words. Dirghasya Kanta Pratukarnasa Karmodyata Kubjatanu Nripeshta Pragalbhyavak Tyagayuto Rihanta Sannaika Sadhyo Shri Pavo Baladya. All right. That is the secret Sanskrit code for Sagittarius. Any questions? I know that 98% of the YouTube audience is proficient with Sanskrit. So nothing else needs to be said. Just kidding. All right, so here's the meanings. Just the word meanings, and then we'll get into more detail. The first thing he says is Dirghasya Kanta. Dirgha means long or tall. So it kind of implies something far-ish, or the space between you and something which is far. So it's like long or high or tall. That's what Dirgha means. And Asya is your mouth, which is actually the part of the mouth that you speak with, so like lips. And Kanta is the part of the throat that you speak with, part of the neck that you speak with. So like the vocal cords, the throat itself. So the first concept is the long mouth and throat. The second concept is Pratu Karanasa. Now, it's not Pratu Karna Nasa. It's Karanasa. If it was Karna Nasa, Pratukarna Nasa, if it was Pratukarna Nasa, then it would be big ears and nose. But it should be Pratukaranasa, which means big body or limbs, and butt, big butt. Cannot lie. And then we got Karma Udyata. The third thing he says, which Udyata means elevated, karma means deeds. And then he has this weird statement, Kubja Tanu. Kubja means crooked or hunched over, and Tanu means body. And then he says Nripeshta, which is not Nripreshta, but Nripa Ishta, which means sought by kings. Kings means, Nripa is kings, and Ishta means deer. Next thing he says about Sag is Pragalbhyavak, proficient speaker. And then Tyagayuta, generous person. Arihanta, destroys enemies. Samnaika Sadhya. Samnaika is a word which means somebody who understands the Vedas. So it means somebody who studies. Sadhya means somebody who seeks or somebody who's perfected. So it's about somebody that's interested in education or who is very good with education. And then Ashvibhava. Ashvibhava is his word for Sagittarius, which is interesting. He doesn't call it Danu here. He calls it Ashvibhava. There's a reason for it. Baladhya, strengthened. So let's do the simple translation and then talk about what it really means. Don't expect to really understand it just from the simple translation. Things need to be explained, connotations need to be made clear. But basically what he's saying is, if Sagittarius rises, expect long neck and mouth, wide limbs and buttocks, resilient and strong body, and elevated deeds. They seek education, are proficient speakers, and are therefore sought by kings and are difficult to defeat. They are generous. Basically, that's what he's saying. But let's get into the interesting stuff now. Have a little conversation about what he's saying. Could Dirga be deep? It could be. Sagittarius, honestly, I know there's something about Sagittarius, but it's not quite deep. It's a fire sign, after all. Fire is showing the forms of things. So depth is a word we have to carefully use. You have to use all your words carefully, especially if you want to get anywhere with astrology, because you communicate meanings in words, and astrology is all about the connotations of symbols, and words are your primary symbols that you'll be using. So you have to be very clinical. That's why to be good at astrology it mainly requires Mercury. With deep, you get depth out of water, not fire. You can see depth and intelligence may be different. Depth and learning may be different. But Dirga is an interesting word. It can mean deep, I guess. But I wouldn't really bring deep in as a word to describe Sagittarius, because the connotations will go off track as you go down the line of interpreting it. Sure, Sagittarius has qualities which relate or similar to depth, but it's not exactly depth. Let's talk about it. First of all, I find it interesting that Alf asked this question. Would the Navamsha ascendant be valid? Alf, my man. I answered this question so many times. Everybody always asks, is this blah blah with the Navamsha? Just, of course, the Navamsha is another chart. Just keep your head straight and just realize the Navamsha is a subchart. If you have Sagittarius rising in the Navamsha, then that's one of your rising signs. It's not your main rising sign, but it's something. All right. Let's talk about it. First, I find it interesting that he calls Sagittarius the horse. Mantreshwar does not use the common name for Sagittarius, which is Dhanu. Usually, Sanskrit refers to Sagittarius as the bow. Not a centaur. But clearly they also have some concept of like a centaur archer, because sometimes Sagittarius is referred to as the horse. Ashva. So he calls it Ashvi Bhav, which means the place of the horse, the sign of the horse, the zodiac of the horse. Now, the reason he does that, it's not for poetic meter. They both have two syllables. The reason he does that is for the connotations of the word Ashvi and the words that immediately surround it. You find actually that the second half of the verse is informed well by the concept of a horse, and the first half is informed well by the concept of a bow, which is kind of interesting. So the phrase that immediately follows Ashvi Bhava is Baladhya. Here's the verse again. I wish I could split the screen, actually. Dirgasya kanta pritukaranasya, the last line, Samnaika sadyo Ashvi Bhavo Baladhya. So Ashvi is setting up an image right before he says Baladya. Baladya means strength. Has a lot of strength. So what he's saying is Sagittarius is as strong as a horse. Now, what does that mean, strong as a horse? I don't know about you, but I remember a funny word with this. Here, I'll read it to you. This indicates physical power. Horses are strong, right? Horsepower. Resistance to illness, horses are healthy. And sexual vitality. Sexual vitality, yes. Horses are worshipped for sexual potency. That's called Ashwamedha. And a lover with a good health is referred to as a horse. Compare with the concept of stallion in English. Remember the Italian stallion? So stallion, that's like a very virile, sexual strength, endurance, vitality. So good news for all you people who are considering Sagittarian lovers. They're strong as a horse. Ashva Baladya. Okay, that's the full meaning of Ashva Baladya. One of my very good friends, is a Sagittarian rising, who should be chuckling at this moment because his secret is revealed. Okay, so good health overall. Good strength overall, like you wouldn't want to like push a Sagittarian physically. They'll push you back and you'll go flying. This person is so funny. This guy, my best friend, he got angry once at a ex-Marine who was traveling with us. And he just looks like a fluffy guy, but he like punched this ex-Marine in the face and like knocked him on the floor. So they're actually quite strong, and they're actually very virile. Okay? Then body like a bow. This is this Kuja Tanu thing. This is very interesting. Now, Sagittarius, he calls it Ashribav, but more commonly it's called Dhanus, which means the bow. And most of the concepts in the first half of the verse evoke the metaphor of an arrow flying high and far. This is the purpose of symbolizing Sagittarius by a bow. People who are foolish think that the stars have shapes to them, and then that's what created the zodiac. I mean, you have to be very foolish to believe that, because the stars don't have shapes to them. There's super random dots of light. The Cancer does not look like a crab. It looks like a square. Aries does not look like a ram. It looks like a line. Maybe some of them are like, remotely look like Scorpio. Okay, it looks like a curved tail, but guess what? In India, they think it looks like a pot, mula, not a scorpion. So I mean, the stars, they're not like they're billboards up in the sky with television sets flashing clear pictures at us. It's not that everybody saw these obvious pictures in the sky, so they made the zodiac from that. That's a ridiculous idea, let's be frank. But what happened is the astrologers put images on the zones of the zodiac to convey what they symbolize as a result of their ruler, element, and mode. And then when the calculations began and they were using Drik Siddhanta, or visual confirmation, for their math, and they needed to use reference stars to check if their calculations were correct. So they made reference stars for the zodiac. So they see, okay, that little thing over there is just a line of 5 faint stars. That's the ram. Remember that. And because it's next to the one that's that triangle, that's the bull. And then this is how the sidereal zodiac arose, by the reference stars taking the place, actually taking the place of the things that they were referenced for. But to come back to this text, the reason why a bow is chosen to signify Sagittarius is because the arrow flies very far from it. The arrow flies very far from the bow, and that is the nature of Sagittarius. And everything in the first half of the verse is a reference to that arrow in flight from a bow. So, for example, the throat and mouth are dirga. Dirga means far away or high. The limbs are pritu. Pritu means far off horizontally. Dirga means far off vertically. Pritu means far off horizontally. The deeds, karma, is uddaya, elevated. The bow is aimed up. The symbolism of the bow is aimed up. It's also important to understand Sagittarius. And he says Kuja, and this is how you can understand it. The Kuja is what happens to a bow. That's why it's called a bow. Bow is very similar to the word bow, isn't it? Because it's the same meaning. To crunch over. And that's what Kuja means. So a bow does this. Okay? You guys, I'm going to put slow mode on to like 20 seconds or something. 25 seconds. And I'm going to request one more time, somebody just organize a text chat for people. They obviously want it. And covering it up. All right. So those are the concepts that relate to it being a bow. Now let's talk about them in depth. One thing he says about Sagittarius is high mouth. Dirga asya kanta. So what the heck does he mean, a high mouth? So this is what you can expect. Neck is a bit longer than normal. And the asya is what I'm thinking is the biggest, the lips. Because asya is the part of the mouth that you speak with, which is lips. Tongue, you can't see that. So the part that you can see is your lips. So it should be bigger lips. And then that's the physical implication of having a high mouth. But the other implication is the way you speak is high or lofty. He's gonna also state that separately. So this part particularly is referring to the physical structure. Okay. Now, unfortunately, because there's so much noise going on, I'm not seeing. Thank you, Sama. So I can't really see if there's anything relevant in the text chat. But if you have a question, then maybe God's willing, I'll see it. And then the next thing he says is Pritukarna Asa. God, I don't belong in this era. I don't belong in this era. I belong in a real classroom with physical people. Pritu, wide limbs. Pritukarna Asa. Pritu means wide and also sturdy. If something is wide, it's sturdy. That's why you put your feet apart when you need to be strong. So when he says Pritu Karna, Karna means the body. And particularly the active parts of the body, like the arms and legs. Karna literally means the cause of things. So it's a reference to the karna, to the body, because it causes action. And it's a reference to the parts of the body that do things. So by saying Pritukarna, you get the concept of a body that's kind of big, or it gets wide, or grows fast. And you get the concept of somebody whose legs are not small, whose feet are not small, whose hands are not small, whose arms are not small. Also, you get the concept of steadiness. Pritu is a horizontal thing, is steady. So it's the concept of a body that's fairly steady, not unbalanced. It's the concept of a hand that doesn't shake much. It's a steady hand. And then there's a cool word here, asa, which you can compare to the English word ass. As. Asa. Sure enough, in Sanskrit, asa means your ass, what you sit on. Hence the word asana for your seat, which means place for your ass. Asa means where you sit, your butt. So he's also saying pritu asa, and this is very significant. I'm not really taking the time to explain these things, but maybe at the end I'll explain the whys. But here it's Sagittarius is in the 9th position. The 9th position physically from the top is your butt. So you get an emphasis there. So big butt means also wide, thick, strong. That's part of the reason why you shouldn't push. See, I maybe because I lived with this best friend of mine for many years, but I have that intuition, like, do not physically push a Sagittarian person, because they don't go back. They don't fall back. And part of the reason is they have a strong butt. All right. Not really that you needed to know that. Sometimes irrelevant things come out of my mouth. The next one is karma udyata, which means elevated deeds. So Sagittarius implies elevated deeds. It means not base deeds. The arrow is pointed up. The person is not interested in going down. The person is not interested in getting lower. The person is interested in going higher. This is a very important thing about Sagittarius, a basic rule about Sagittarius. They don't want to lower themselves. They don't want to decrease themselves. They want to increase and raise up. So their deeds are meant for that, and they're enthusiastic about the deeds that will improve them. So one very important implication is they dislike doing low-class things. They dislike doing base things. They dislike doing unethical things. They like to do things in a high-class way. They like to do things correctly and morally, ethically. That's another important thing about it. I mean, this is another thing about it being in the 9th position. But honestly, all of the things are more explainable by the ruler, element, and mode, but this 9th position also has something else that comes up that is causing these things. Now let's talk about this concept of the bent body, Kubja Tanu. Bent typically means crooked, hunched, or short. There's a famous... Actually, there's many things about this verse which are very reminiscent of Puranic tales. You have Prithu, and you have... there's other things too, but another big name is Kubja. Kubja is a big character in Krishna Lila. Kubja was a hunchback woman. She had a deformity. She had an extreme hunchback, so her name was Kubja. But I can't remember exactly what it was that she did. She either brought some clothes or some flowers or something while Krishna was in Dwarka, and she gave them to Krishna, even though she was meant to give them to somebody else. She was meant to bring them to the king, so she's going to get in trouble. But she was kind of so taken with Krishna that she gave them to him, and Krishna put his finger on her chin and picked her up and got rid of her hunchback. So there's this popular figure Kuja, if you know about it, then it's obvious to you what Kuja means. It means a hunchback. So what is he saying? The hunchback of Notre Dame was a Sagittarian? Sagittarius people are probably hunchback, but that makes no sense with the bow aiming up, loftiness, bigness, tallness. It goes counter to everything we know, right? Including what everything we know about Sagittarius is it's inclined to go up and get bigger. And also the text itself said strong as a horse. If you have a deformity in your body, you're not strong as a horse. So you should X that out as being the accurate understanding of what Kuja Tanu means. The best way to understand Kuja Tanu is in reference to the bow. The bow goes from straight to Kuja and then back to straight. It's straight, you pull it back, now it's Kuja, you let it go. So Sagittarius has a body like a bow. What does it mean? One thing means it can bend. It's flexible, but the other thing means that it's has that kind of vitality, like a horse. Like a horse gets running quickly. The Sagittarian body can spring into action. And I think the word resilient would be good. It's a good English word to convey this meaning of Kuja Tanu. Resilient. The resilient body restores itself quickly. If you keep this in context of Ashwa Baladya, then you get a complete picture here. Sagittarius gives a body which is resilient. So it's also good in defending against illness. It will recover quickly. If a Sagittarian goes out and parties late at night, they recover fairly quickly the next day. If a Sagittarian person gets corona, they get recovered faster. If a Sagittarian person cuts their hair, they have to cut it again soon. It grows back quicker. I've never seen hair and nails grow quicker than in Sagittarian natives. It's almost terrifying. It's almost like those cartoons where they spill the hair growth tonic on the guy. Okay, so those are the basics about the Sagittarian physique. It's making the body more like a bow and a horse. To summarize, anything relevant here? Horyu says Pritukarna could be extensive reasoning. No. I think you have a long A or something wrong, or an A off if you're looking these things up in dictionaries. Yeah, it's also not Kuja Tanu. It could mean that they bow. It could mean that they bow. But this would be... So somebody, the wine bottle mentioned this. So this would be complicated to understand because they're lofty. And fire signs, they bow, but they have karma udyata. They have nobility to them. So they could be bowing in a certain way that we will understand in a second when we look at some of the other phrases. That could be another implication of Kuja Tanu. Thriller Kid says, I like Sagittarius energy. That's kind of a... Gentle Esther, you said that too. Could hunchback mean deferential to authority? Most people like Sagittarian energy. It's just one of those signs. I remember when I first started investigating astrology, I just thought, what the hell is this thing with Sagittarius? People are infatuated with it. It's like Sagittarius in the 9th house is like Paris Hilton in the 1990s. Like, people would not stop talking about it. Like, give me a break. Show some love to Capricorn, for God's sake. What do you do? Get your head out of Sagittarius. Yeah, but everybody is a fan of Jupiter. Everybody is a fan of Sagittarius. Everybody is a fan of the 9th house. And it's deserved. It's deserved. Sagittarian ascendant is a pretty resilient thing. It's kind of hard to spoil it. All right, let's look at the next bit. This bit actually is referring to what you guys were coming up with, the possibility of what hunchback could mean. Hunchback. Yes. The next thing he says is Nripa Ishta. Kings seek advisors to help them make effective decisions. Saying that Sagittarius is sought by kings therefore indicates that they are effective advisors and educators. That's the main meaning. The phrase Nripa Ishta also means agreeable with authorities. This reinforces the concept of having elevated deeds. Sagittarius respects laws and therefore has easier relationships with lawgivers and other authority figures. So you might be thinking, whoa, but Sagittarius is a fire sign. But that's okay. Even Leo is very into law. Actually, this is what fire sign is all about. You might just be overthinking Aries as a fire sign, because Aries is individualized law because of Mars being the ruler. But actually, fire is obsessed with law. That's what fire does. It shows the difference between right and wrong, which people hate. People who want to hide behind murkiness, they don't like fire because fire brings clarity. So yes, Sagittarius is affable to and with the law. So Ishta means dear or desired. So it goes both ways. If Nripa Ishta means the kings desire the Sagittarian, and Nripa Ishta means the Sagittarian holds kings dear. So if you say the kings desire the Sagittarian, that means the Sagittarian is an advisor, because that's what kings desire. Kings need, kings want, kings respect. Ishta also implies respect. Kings respect an advisor who can help them make the decisions that they constantly have to make. So the implication here is Sagittarian knows how to give advice. The other thing is, if you flip it the other way, where Sagittarius holds kings dear, that means they don't violate the king's rules. They abide by laws. And that goes along with their karma udita. So Sagittarians tend to be okay with the authority figure. But it's a dual sign, and it's intellectual, so it's weird. You can get this wrong easily. They're not a follower. Sagittarius is not a follower, but Sagittarius is not a rebel either. They're somewhere in between. Because Sagittarius is very intellectual, they never quite can be a follower. And they're a teacher. Sagittarius is a teacher, an advisor, an information giver. So it's not a follower. You can't put it in that category. But yet it has fidelity and faithfulness to lawgivers, authorities, experts, etc. So that's the full picture. Make sense? Then let's look at this next one. Pragalbhyavak, proficient speech. Elaborating on the theme of being capable educators, introduced in the sought by king's image, Mantreshwar describes Sagittarius as being proficient speakers. The term for proficient, pragalbhya, conveys the sense of saying things that are important and having the confidence to be a lead speaker like a teacher. So pragalbhya means confident, conveying a sense of importance and primariness. And Vak means the words. So, because Sagittarius belongs to Jupiter, they are good with speaking. They don't, Sagittarius is not the kind of sign that's timid. So this is the kind of person who can give a speech without freaking out. They can go on a stage without freaking out. This is the kind of person that can, like, that's what you need to do to be a teacher. Actually, everybody else sits down and quiets down and listens while you speak. Okay. Then this, the next thing is seeks education. Samnaika sadhya. So sadhya means, I'm explaining the word sadhya to mean this, the thing which is sought. Sadhya is the goal. Sadhana is the way to get to the goal. Sadhana and sadhya are pair words. Sadhana is the practice, and sadhya is the perfection. So you can take sadhya to mean the thing which is sought. And you can simultaneously take sadhya to mean the perfected state of it. So since samnaika means education, then sadhya means Sagittarius is seeking education. That's what they want. And you can also take it to mean they are educated. They have achieved education. And it means that both of them at the same time. If you seek something, you get it, and you still seek further advancement in it. All right, to be a capable speaker and advisor, the previous two traits, one needs to have education. How are you gonna advise somebody? Contrary to the YouTube philosophy, which is everybody has an equal voice. Yeah, everybody has an equal voice, but not everybody is equally significant. You can speak, but I don't think I'm going to listen. If I'm not impressed, I'll find somebody else. So how are you going to be somebody that people listen to? Pragalbhya Vak, you have to have something meaningful to say. Samnaika sadhya. And that's why because the Sagittarian tendency is to be the person that speaks to other people. Therefore, they're going for the backup. They're looking for stuff to say. Good stuff to say. Real stuff to say. That's why the primary goal, their main motive, is education. And that's another reason why the bow is pointing up. And that's another reason why the deeds are described as lofty or elevating. Karma udita. They want to improve their knowledge. They want to get more information. This is why it's a dual sign. This is because it's a dual sign. Therefore, the primary goal of Sagittarius is education. For this, it likes to attend schools, for example, though not quite as much as Pisces. Pisces is the real student because it's water, so it's more receptive. Sagittarius is more like the teacher, but still it likes schools. It likes classes like schools. It likes experts. And it likes to listen to experts. Even though it itself is an expert and wants to teach, it likes to hear other teachers so that it has content to teach. It likes to read books. Whatever the modern version of reading books may be also. You can include that. And in general, one of the traits of Sagittarius is they're talkative, really. They're talkative, and you might think that since it's a fire sign, it's just extroverted and talky. But out of all the fire signs, it has the most listening capability. Because the motive of Sagittarius is not just to talk, but to say something meaningful. Pragalbhya, I always say that wrong. Pragalbhya. Right? It wants to say something meaningful, so it's listening to learn what would be meaningful to say. Its ultimate motive as a fire sign is to speak But because it's ruled by Jupiter, it really likes education, and so it's also got a healthy amount, strong amount of desire to listen and learn. Okay? So, interesting conversationalists. You can have conversations with Sagittarian people. Yeah. Don't forget, obviously, can't ignore all of our basics of astrology, that a person is more than just one thing. Of course, you can have a person with a terrible Mercury. You're not going to say a word. And they have a Sagittarian rising. Maybe they write diaries. Of course, the rest of the chart is going to modify the basics. But what we're talking about now is the basics that will get modified. Progressed, not progressed, whether it's Amsha or not Amsha, it's Sagittarius is still Sagittarius. All you have to do is know your theory about what a progressed thing is. A progressed thing is a variation to the main thing. All you have to do is know your theory about what a subchart is, what an Amsha is. It's a sub thing to the main thing. So if Sagittarius shows up in a sub thing, then it's a subtext to the main thing. Right, now they also have this bit. He also says this thing about destroying enemies, Arihanta, which is sort of like out of the blue. But actually not really. What is a bow and arrow? It's not a plow. A bow and arrow is a weapon. So Sagittarius is kind of aggressive, but its field of aggression is Jupiterian. So its field of aggression is idealistic, yet it is a dual sign, so it's not going to come across as an aggressive flavor. Yet they're going to get the job done of defeating the enemy. So this is why Sagittarians, they're preachers. They are teachers. They're pragalbya. They speak. And so they tend to be able to defeat an opponent. And Sagittarius is well-informed and confident because of pragalbya and because of being samnika sadhya. So therefore it's very difficult to deal with a Sagittarian, whether you're physically wrestling them or whether you are intellectually wrestling them. It's difficult to deal with them. It's difficult to conquer them. They have a way of winning. They defeat enemies like a horse. So this is in the second half of the verse where he's mentioning the horse thing. So what does that mean? They're like a horse. The horse, the way that a horse deals with a conflict is running. A horse is a vegetarian animal. It doesn't kill anything, but it runs. So what will happen with a Sagittarian in a debate or in a fight is that they move around a lot because it's a dual sign. They'll move around and they'll hit you from many, many different places, and they'll make you chase them to many, many different places. So it's very difficult to catch them anywhere. And it's very easy for them to catch you because they're coming at you from many sides. That's the way that Sagittarius defeats enemies. If you are Sagittarian and you're trying to overcome a problem, that's what you should be doing. You should never, as a Sagittarian, you should never invest all of your effort into one solution. You should put bits of energy into a whole bunch of different solutions. And one of those solutions is going to connect. And when it connects, that's when you put your invest in that. So think of a metaphor your problem to a physical fight, and just think of how you would want to run around the person and put a whole bunch of traps all around the person. And then whichever one clicks, that's the one where you go capture them after it clicks. That's how you deal with problems as a Sagittarian. And then he says also Tyagyutta, which means very generous. This implies willingness to sacrifice for others, giving them one's time, resources, etc., and being generous about giving gifts, encouragement, and compliments. So Sagittarians can be very good with very complex passive aggression or very complex tact in politics. A very complex strategy. Sagittarians are really on this dual quadruplicity where things are balanced. So they can be very generous and complimentary and encouraging. But at the same time, they might be weakening you or pulling you out, drawing you out by doing that. All right, so if you can make sense of these themes, it's very easy. It's very easy to make sense of the themes. It's all just Jupiter, really. If you just think of Jupiter, then generous, okay, easy, right? Overcomes obstacles, maybe that's not easy to explain with Jupiter alone. Seeks education, Jupiter, okay, easy. Proficient speech, Jupiter, the ruler. Sought by kings, Jupiter, the advisor, the priest. And then the things about the body, most of them have to do with the speaking organs. The speaking organs are big. That's all Jupiter. And then bigger body, big, that's all Jupiter. So most of the whole thing about Sagittarius is just based on the fact that it's ruled by Jupiter. The spice that's added to Jupiter is the fire element. Then it gives a person kind of ambition. So karma udita, they have some ambition to improve. It adds ambition to Jupiter. And now they get a little bit of feistiness to them. They get a little bit of feistiness to their knowledge. And that's why that now explains the difficult to defeat part. And then the rest of it comes from the dual nature. So they're balanced. That's some Samnika, especially with Jupiter. But of course, all of Jupiter's signs are dual. So they're going to be intellectual and looking for all the angles on things. That is Sagittarius in a nutshell. Any last questions about it? Dirgasya kanta pratukaranasa. Kamodyata kubja tanun nipeshta pragalbyavak tyagayutori hanta samnaika sadyoshvi bhavo baladya. Sunita says, how does the natural enemy between Jupiter and Mercury affect the qualities of Sagittarius, particularly the learning and speech parts? Jupiter and Mercury are very similar. Look at my video on Rahu and Ketu in Pisces and Virgo, or Rahu and Ketu in Gemini and Sagittarius, to understand how Jupiter and Mercury interact. They're very similar in that they're both intellectual. The way that they are clashing or inimical to each other is that they're on different sides of the intellectual equation. Jupiter is on the side of the teacher, Mercury is on the side of the learner, so that can clash. And Jupiter is on the side of the expert, the textbook, the Shastra, the authority of the information, whereas Mercury is on the side of the inventor, the new idea, the invention, the discovery. And those two things can certainly clash. But with Sagittarius, you're putting Jupiter with fire. So this is mid-spectrum Jupiter. It's come more towards Mercury because fire gives things that make Jupiter more like Mercury. So it's giving ambition. It's a little bit interested in what might come up new. Right. Anything else? Thank you, Thriller Kid. I'm not wise. I just read the books. That might, this is so stupid, but if it's wisdom, it's just the wisdom that I have is to pay attention to what's the wise people had. Gentle Esther says something from experience, obviously. It reminds me of different comforts for Gemini versus Sagittarius. Gemini tends to trust or be comfortable with people who've experienced something, where Sagittarius trusts doctors or experts. I think this is your experience, but I think you might be overlooking the fact that a doctor or expert should have experienced something also. I'm sorry, but I'm very far on the side of Sagittarian. An expert is not an expert unless they also have personal experience. An expert is not just a person who spouts dogma. An expert is a person who has understood the experts and has experienced it. But yeah, I think Sagittarian feels comfortable if a person has nripa, if the person has a position or a mark of authority, then Sagittarian person feels comfortable to listen to them. Whereas Gemini doesn't really care about that. And in this sense, Gemini is superior because Gemini is actually interested in content rather than ranking. Yes, that's what I was thinking too. All right, guys. Thank you very much for your time. I'll see you soon in 2 more days for 5th Canto of Bhagavatam.